Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great week. In the exercise of the week video for this week, we're going to cover what's called hip internal rotation PAILs and RAILs. PAILs and RAILs is a specific type of sequence throughout some of our stretching mobility drills to not just open up range of motion, but build strength throughout that end range of motion. Like I mentioned, we don't just want more range of motion to have more range of motion. We want more range of motion as needed, and we want to be able to strengthen, control, and use that range of motion rather than being just some arbitrary range of motion that we have but we can't actually access, right? So internal rotation is, if we look at my thigh here, my thigh is neutral. If I internally rotated this thigh inward inside the hip socket, that's internal rotation. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Now, 90-90 position is what we're going to get into here. So like I call it hip internal rotation PAILs and RAILs, or 90-90 hip internal rotation PAILs and RAILs. 90-90 position is knee straight in front of the hip, shin out to the side, 90 degrees. Knee straight out to the side, 90 degrees right there. So this is my 90-90 position. Some of you might notice just getting into this position is like, man, that's really tight, right? This back hip is limiting me. That's internal rotation, which is limited. So we might notice from this position, right, this may not be the best position for some of you to start. Just to ease off this, if you need a regression, we can go down to the hand and bring that hand further to the side, a little easier now in this position, a little more forgiving. If that is still challenging, we could also go down to the forearm. So we have almost level 1 here, we have level 2, and then we have all the way up here, level 3, right? So we can find where we fit into that sequence. So when it comes to hip internal rotation, what we want to do is actually get our body to turn and rotate towards this hip. So the entire sequence when it comes to PAILs and RAILs is a 2-minute stretch in that position. So I'm going to actually breathe in, trap some air into the lower abdominal area, stay tall. I'm going to try to go as far as I can. I'm rotating and turning, and that's about it for me, towards this back leg to get into and stretch internal rotation. Once I find that position, I'm going to hold for 2 minutes. Should be a fairly uncomfortable stretch. For a lot of people, stretching into internal rotation feels more like a joint sensation than a muscle sensation. It's not going to be like stretching your hamstrings. You're going to feel this deeper down within the hip joint, like almost an achiness to it is what it's going to feel like. That's correct if you're feeling that. But rotating as far as I can towards that leg, holding, trying to get everything to relax over 2 minutes at all times, right? I see a lot of people cheating. We're either rounding our back, we're leaning away, or we're lifting this. Keep all of that in position. Maintain good integrity of your body. Rotate to find internal rotation. Okay, at the end of 2 minutes, it's going to be a 15-second active contraction. So I want to actively drive this knee down into the ground, engage the muscles of the hip. I'm going to ramp up, so I'm driving that knee down. I'm increasing tension throughout the body, driving this shin down, engaging the abs, engaging the hands, everything, trying to irradiate and create tension throughout the body so I can then do a better job of engaging this back hip, building tension and ramping up over 15 seconds, 10%, 20%. 30, 50, 70, 80. I'm pushing hard in there. You're going to find what intensity works for you. Don't push hard just to push hard. Respect the limits of those muscles in that joint. So find what works for you. Building up and pushing down in there over 15 seconds. At the end of the 15 seconds, I'm going to take a nice deep breath. I want to engage those muscles that are doing the opposite motion, allowing me to rotate deeper into hip internal rotation. I'm going to try to rotate a few more degrees to get more rotation, feeling that really deep inside the hip here. After 15 seconds of me engaging those, building up an intensity of that contraction as I rotate, I'm going to take a nice deep breath. I'm trying to relax and turn everything off over 30 seconds. At this point, I should be deeper within my stretch position. So if I started here, that was my end range of motion. After I did the contraction in both directions, I'm able to turn deeper and really get into that hip, right? You can see here, I can rotate my spine all day, but as I start to rotate the hip, right, as the pelvis rotates back, that femur continues to rotate inward, deeper. That's where I'm getting more internal rotation, which you'll feel is pretty deep inside the hip joint there. That's when I'm trying to breathe and relax to at the very end. Again, hip internal rotation is one that's really overlooked, right? And it matters so much from function of the hip. Internal external rotation targets more so the hip joint capsule, some of those smaller rotators, right? Everyone hears about piriformis, hip rotators, all of those muscles around the hip. We need to use internal and external rotation to get to those. Oftentimes we only use those to stabilize, but in reality we need to use those to move the hip joint because it directly affects the joint itself, the capsule. For those of you that have a history of labral tears, femoral acetabular impingement, anything else deeper inside that hip joint, some cartilage damage, building better internal rotation, external rotation to be able to allow that femur to roll and glide within the socket is super important, right? This will open up that hip joint to provide more range of motion to then improve other areas as well, whether we have tight hip flexors, tight hamstrings, tight quads, right? This is really the foundational movement that we need to isolate first and then move on to some of those other areas. So I hope that helps, right? I hope you enjoyed the video today. Work on this on both sides. See if you notice any differences. Some of you might notice as you get from one side to the other side, even just setting up in this position, like, man, that is a lot tighter. I need to back off on that side because that's pretty restricted. Work on that more restricted side. Really try to open up that hip joint, right? Work on your rotations, work on rolling the pelvis, getting more internal rotation there in that position, and just see if explore that position and see how you feel. Some of you, that might be a good starting point. Other people might feel pretty comfortable. They can just sit up right in that position all day long. And if that's the case, we want to work on strengthening that range of motion. But I hope you enjoyed the video today. 90-90 hip internal rotation, PAILs and RAILs. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, drop a line below, and I look forward to discussing it more with you. Have a great week, everyone.